into some video artists of note. I'm going to start with a man whose quote I gave you, Bill Viola. And Bill Viola is very well known in the art world for making videos that have almost like a sense of religiosity to them or spirituality to them. He's known for doing the kind of pieces that you see here, like Tristan's Ascension or this work, Ascension. Again, you can watch the long form videos. They're much more helpful for seeing the way that his narrations play out. But in these pieces, what he usually does is he has a physical body of some kind, and then he plays with what I call elementals. He plays with things like fire or water, what we call the basic elements. And often, like in Tristan's Ascension, you have someone, you know, almost turning into water or evaporating into water and rising up out of the water. Or in Ascension, the idea of someone plunging into water. And I love in this piece, he almost is making like a cross shape. So many people, when they look at his works here, they talk about, this almost a spiritual referencing we keep getting in the titles, things like Ascension. That word actually is related to like, ascending into heaven. So if you look at like religious pieces, especially in the Christian tradition, they'll have like the Ascension of Mary, things like this. Um, so, he plays with these elementals, I say, but then he also kind of plays with these spiritual themes all at the same time. And so there are these intriguing artworks that don't really have a proper narrative, might we say, but yet they do all at the same time. He says you're giving structure to time. One of the things I always kind of point out to my students is video art can make you work. Because if a video like this is like 10 minutes long, and you have to stand in the gallery watching it evolve, watching it play out. We've talked about attention spans in the course before, the idea that someone only looks at an artwork for like 10 to 15 seconds, Warhol said. So, I think that video art, it often makes you work, let's say. And so early video artists who were working in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like Viola, they tended to do what we call longer form and play with the longer form. But today, I don't know if that's something artists are quite so interested in because they know that our attention spans have shortened. So you have to kind of sit and wait for these things to play out in someone like Viola's work. And I think that's another property of the work to consider, that you kind of have to work for it. But yeah, he plays with these kind of elementals, these spiritual qualities. And I jokingly say that I'm doing my best to interpret these pieces for you, but my interpretation might not be complete. These works to me sometimes are very ambiguous in how they read. Another artist I want to show you who I really, really enjoy is Dara Birnbaum. And she started out thinking about like how TV imagery worked. And then she was also including some feminism into the mix. This is one of her first works she did that got really big attention back in the 70s. And it was based on the TV show Wonder Woman. This is old school Wonder Woman, right? Not Gal Gadot, but this is old school Wonder Woman. And again, I gave you the long form video to watch. And it starts off with kind of this imagery of explosions. You can see it down at the bottom right. And then you move into the Wonder Woman sequence where she twirls, right? And then she turns into Wonder Woman. And there's other imagery related to her, kind of, fighting and different kinds of things. Now, just like with Vertical Roll, we find that there's a lot of repetition, right? Birnbaum kind of keeps glitching the tape, I'd say. She keeps glitching it and glitching it and glitching it, almost as a way to keep saying, what do you think of this? 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 And make you have to concentrate on that one roll of imagery going over and over and over and over again. So, again, when you're watching it, you have this sense of almost being, for me, I feel like I'm being kind of washed over with the images, washed over. And there's a repetition of it that kind of keeps clicking in my brain, forcing me to have to think about what do I make of this character? As a woman, of course, I think she's also working with the idea of power, I think she's also working with how women see themselves or see each other. I love this still of her looking at herself in a mirror. And by the way, in video language, when we say still, S-T-I-L-L, still, we mean like a shot, one frame, boom. So here you have a still, and she's sort of looking at herself. And again, I think it's about reflection of feminine roles as well. So this piece got a lot of attention when it first came out, and it still does today, right? Because it's working with so many different kinds of themes. Someone kind of following along, I think, in Birnbaum's footsteps, is Pipilotti Rist. And I had mentioned I would talk about like a 1-channel or 2-channel video installation. Here you'll notice this is what we call a 2-channel. You have 2 walls, right? And it's projecting imagery. Sometimes the imagery will be different, and so that's true what we call 2-channel. And sometimes it's one set of imagery, so that's more like what we call 1-channel, kind of, done over a larger area. So Pipilotti Rist works with 1-channel and 2-channel. And you'll notice that what they do is they take up gallery space. They become almost installation-like. Installation's the final thing I talk about in the course, because it truly is an amalgamation of all the mediums brought together. Because often with an installation work, you'll see sculptural elements, you'll see painted elements, you'll see video elements. And it's all done in like an environmental way, where you're in like in a room, so video art to me sort of, it's a preface or a foreshadowing of what installation art will be, essentially. Probably the most famous of Rist's works is Ever is Over All, where she's walking down the street in this beautiful girly dress and carrying this kind of like flower-like thing. And she's passing people, there's a cop behind her. And then all of a sudden she starts smashing car windows. She starts just attacking these cars. But people's reaction is not to stop her or be like, hey, what are you doing? Even the cop passes her and kind of gives her a like, hey, nice work, little, gesture. Again, you can see this in the long form video. And so for me, I always think her works are about disjunction or things not making sense. And she uses a lot of songs in her pieces. Like in Sip My Ocean, she uses Wicked Game. So she uses a lot of music and other pop cultural elements in her pieces to create kind of the environments that she wants to make. Now, I'm a big fan of art history becoming part of pop culture. And when I saw Beyonce's Hold Up video when she did her Lemonade album, I was like, oh, you're just taking Rist's work, right, and basically making it into a platform for a video. And if you know the Carters, they love art. They do. They love it. They use it in many, many different ways. One of my favorite videos is Ape Shit, because they literally filmed it in the Louvre, which is just amazing to me. It's what happens when you have millions of dollars and you can you do these wonderful things with that money. And so they are very big as a family on highlighting art and showing art. So if you've never seen that video, it's definitely worth a look just to compare it to the original Ever is Over All piece. And again, these are works that don't really have narrative. They can be very much about sort of just following the situation and kind of trying to make sense of the situation, rather than, oh, this is what that means. So sometimes they can be ambiguous, as I mentioned before. Another artist I wanted to show you is Douglas Gordon, and both he and Christian Marclay, that we'll look at here in a minute, both started doing video works in the 90s and into the 2000s and into the present day with the idea of how do you augment or play with time within video art. Notice that these are still like 1-channel or 2-channel displays typically, when you look at how they're done in a gallery setting, how they're projected. Gordon did this work called 24-Hour Psycho. He took the movie Psycho, the old classic movie, and he slowed it down to 2 frames per second rather than 24 frames per second, I think it was. So he took the running time of around 2 hours-ish, and he lengthened it out to 24 hours. And so notice he's not changing anything about the film's narration. The story's the story. What he did was slow it down and make it play over a much longer period of time, which when you see the piece sort of creates this creepy, strange vibe in a way that, is different from even the way the original movie had a creepy, strange vibe. So he's playing with time and he's playing with format. And I think that's something early video artists started And then someone like Gordon continues. Christian Marclay is all the rage these days in video art. He's definitely someone to keep an eye on. And he first kind of came onto the scene for doing pieces such as this. This is called The Clock. Very intriguing work where he basically created a movie that ran over 24 hours. And at various points in the film, you see different watches, timepieces, clocks, etc. And they're always at the exact same time that you're watching the movie. He pulled these images from popular media. So he pulled them from existing movies. So as you watch it, you realize you're seeing like all your favorite actors or all your favorite films. And you're like, oh, wait, hold on. This is very familiar. So I love how he plays with the format of why to make a film in the first place. He then pulls from existing films. So he's not making new stuff. He's not creating new narrative. He's taking from narrative that exists. And then the final kicker about this is that it runs for 24 hours. When they show it in a museum, so when it's shown in a museum theater, they have to agree to keep the museum open 24 hours so that people can come in and watch the movie whenever they want to during that 24-hour period. I think that's pretty brilliant. So you're questioning and challenging like the way we even deal with movies in the first place, which is usually like 2-3 hours tops, and we're like, okay, that's too long, right? I need an intermission. So he kind of framed it as, people should be able to come and go. There's not a specific narrative that they're missing out on part if they come in too late, which is, if you come back to Psycho and think about Psycho, by the way, when Alfred Hitchcock created the original film, he very much said, I don't want people being allowed into the theater after the movie starts. Like, they can't come in past like 5 minutes. Because if you've never seen the movie, there's a very specific twist that happens, right, at this point in the movie, about 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes in. So he was like, no. They can't come in past that time or the movie won't make any sense and it will be ruined. And no. So he directed, movie theaters like, do not let people in. They shouldn't be allowed in. So I always think about Marclay kind of saying people can wander in anytime they want. It's so different than, again, a traditional narrative film, how that would be addressed, might we say. So note that these artists are all kind of doing something different, but they're really, really challenging, like what film's purpose is. And the final one I want to show you before we kind of look at a favorite of mine, which is Matthew Barty here in a second. The final artist I want to show you is someone who's been doing work really since the beginning of the 2000s up till today, which is Calfee. And in her works, she is exploring, this sense of like, what is reality? I think about this in her work, Cosplayers. Like, what is reality? And do we even like reality anymore? What is the idea of utopia? What is the idea of happiness? What's the banal stuff we have to do every day? So I told you that Warhol was very interested in what we call banality, the everyday stuff that's really, really boring. And, to me, Calfee is like, okay, people work these jobs. Because in Who's Utopia, she's in a light bulb factory. She's filming people in a light bulb factory. So the first part of the video is just these people doing their jobs. And I'm sure they aren't all that exciting, making light bulbs, right? And then midway through, she switches to people dancing. She has a ballerina, and this guy, he's my favorite. He's got this style of dance that I just, again, watched the long form video. Ooh, yeah, I'm like, this is intriguing, visually interesting. And you also have this angel who's kind of running around in the factory as well. And so again, I think she's questioning like, what is reality? I also love her piece called Cosplayers, where she sets up these scenes that almost look like video games. And lets them play out in these very graphic ways. And then later on in the film, you see these cosplayers just like doing everyday activities, like eating breakfast, looking at their phone while their dad's next to them, like reading a newspaper, things like this. And maybe her larger question is like, why do we have to feel the need to filter reality so highly in today's modern age? Why do we live online? Why do we cosplay? Why do we like gaming? If you really look at like what people do with their spare time, it's about escape. It's about fantasy. It's not about reality. and why do we do that? Let's say, what attracts us to that. So I love her works. I'll also show you some of her work using Second Life a little later on as well.